And there'll be some time for Q&A at the end, so please enjoy.
Yeah, just pick that up. Is there a clicker? Is it working? Yeah. You guys can hear me okay? I'll start up here and I might end up down there. So thanks for coming. My name is Matthew Phillips. I'm a neurologist at Waikato Hospital, as Ryan mentioned. That was a really nice introduction, what you did there. I think I would agree with almost all of the things that people put there. I guess when things seem confusing and it's like if you actually tried to do all those things, it would be all of your daytime job, right? Like just doing those things. There's often a deeper reason, a deeper thing that can connect all those things. And so I would define health as sort of optimized metabolism in your body. I would say the best strategy for achieving that is simply to embark on an intermittent fasting regimen. And why aren't we doing it? Bad advice and a lack of understanding of the potential power of such a regimen. That's not to say that almost everything else there isn't right, because I think it is, but it's going deeper and trying to unify it at a deeper level. And fasting blows through pretty much all three of those, the third category, all those reasons, because it's so easy to do. It amplifies everything else you do throughout your life. So we're going to talk about fasting quite a bit, which interestingly was one of the things not mentioned. All right, so this talk is called Metabolic Strategies in Healthcare, a New Era. That's sunset in Myanmar a few years ago now, where I sort of started to conceive of these things. This is Louis Pasteur. Now, he was a champion of this thing called Germ theory in France a couple hundred years ago. He was a chemist and a microbiologist, not a medical doctor. And this germ theory had been around for a while, but Pasteur really took it to a new level. He was a hero of mine when I was a kid. I was like 5 or 6 years old. I don't know what I was doing. I didn't like Superman or anything. I liked this guy. My mom bought me this little book on Louis Pasteur. I thought he was the greatest. So anyways, he had this sort of disease-centric theory. Germ theory is a disease-centric theory. It basically says you've got pathogens, so bacteria, viruses, and so on. They get in your body, they reproduce, they cause disease. Pretty simple to understand. And so basically, how do you treat that? You target them and you destroy them, right? Very straightforward. And basically, the focus is on suppression and elimination. Now, this germ theory is still with us today, and it's spilled over beyond infectious diseases. I hope I can show you how that has happened. He had a contemporary, and this guy was named Antoine Béchamp, and he was also in France, and he had a different theory called terrain theory. Now, these guys debated for decades, and this guy was a little older. Pasteur looked up to this guy. And very few people know about Antoine Béchamp. So he was a scientist and a doctor. So he was actually a clinician. He saw patients who championed terrain or host theory. This is a very different theory. This is a health-centric theory. And what I mean by that is it said, yes, we have pathogens. Of course, we have bacteria and viruses. But if you have a good terrain or host, they're only going to get in there and be scavengers, the vast majority of them. They're just going to scavenge around and do their thing and not actually cause disease. Now, if you think about that, that made a lot more sense to me when I read about this, a few years ago. I mean, the flu virus comes around every year. Some people get sick. A lot of people don't get any symptoms or very mild symptoms. I can't remember the last time I was symptomatic. And so germ theory is not adequate to explain that. It's not just you get the germs and then you get the disease. That doesn't make sense. There's a lot of people who don't. This one makes more sense. If you have a weak terrain, a weak health, a weak body, then the germs will be problematic. But if your terrain is strong, they won't. And so this was the opposite theory that was the counter to germ theory at the time. And basically it said there's a dysfunction in the tissues or cells is the origin of disease, and you need to restore that. It's not about destroying and suppressing things like germ theory, it's about restoring things, true healing, right? And this is not the way we think of things in medicine today. We focus on, I'll show you, destroying and eliminating. So it was on restoration, but unfortunately, Béchamp didn't have a target. Pasteur had all these germs, these bacteria and viruses, and new ones are being identified every year. He had nothing. So all he said was like, get more sun, get more exercise, kind of like that chart we had up there. He was making these recommendations, but he couldn't put the dots together. So he lost the debate very badly. And terrain theory went into obscurity. And it's still in obscurity, to be honest. So let's look at the lifestyle disorders. Germ theory is now applied to most disorders. I'm going to go to the hospital right after this. I'm going to do my ward rounds and see a bunch of patients on the neurology ward, and all of them will have a lifestyle disorder. I guarantee it. So if we look at New Zealand and the top causes of death, here's a top 10. The lifestyle disorders basically dominate the top 10. The number one there is diseases of heart attacks and strokes, essentially. So that's atherosclerosis. That's a thickening, hardening of the arteries that causes almost all the heart attacks and a good number of the strokes. I'd probably say most of the strokes. Cancer is number 2. It's almost as common. Okay, we know cancer is very common. Neurodegeneration, that is where the neurons are, the cells in the brain are sort of withering away and dying. Alzheimer's is the most common of those, followed by Parkinson's, and there's a few others. Underline all of the top 10, except for the suicides and the traumas, except for those two. And actually it probably does underlie most of those, because mental health has a strong metabolic basis. It's this thing called the metabolic syndrome, and I'm sure you've heard of it, but you may not know what it is. The metabolic syndrome is this cluster of things: being overweight or obese, particularly around the belly, being pre-diabetic or diabetic, and as Ryan said, 50% of people in New Zealand are pre-diabetic or diabetic. That's an incredible number. If you go back 50 years, this was extremely rare. Now it's common, it's the new normal. Being overweight, 2/3 of the country is overweight or obese. 2/3, this is the new normal. It's normal to have this metabolic syndrome. Okay, so the metabolic syndrome is overweight or obese plus pre-diabetes/diabetes, hypertension, so high blood pressure, and then you have the other two are cholesterol abnormalities in your blood. Not the LDL cholesterol that the GPs are told to focus on. That's not one of the factors, it's 2 other factors. So all of these things, if you look at the research, and decades of research, they're all underpinned by this thing called mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, mitochondria are the little batteries in all your cells. There's hundreds of them per cell, and almost all cells, not all of them. And they make the energy for us, almost all our energy. And I see the cells as like the little houses that the mitochondria live in. And they run around the cell and they work very hard all the time. In all of these disorders, there's rampant mitochondrial dysfunction. It's very well known. Okay, and I'm taking the idea that this is the target Bishop needed. He did not know about mitochondria at the time. Nobody knew about them. They had been identified. So they knew about bacteria. They didn't know about these guys. This is what he needed. If he had this target, maybe terrain theory could have gained more traction. I've written a paper on this. I try to make it readable, so it's there. You can go to the URL later, Ryan. I'm happy to give you the slides if you want. So it explains this a lot better. It's hard to explain it in 20 minutes. Okay, so anyways, let's look at the current paradigm. When I go to hospital today, this is the way pretty much every doctor in the hospital is going to be thinking along these lines, because this is how we're taught in medical school. So you've got these lifestyle disorders, these multiple diseases, and I hope you understand that you can see that atherosclerosis, cancer, Alzheimer's, metabolic syndrome, these are the scourges of humanity, not C19. These are the true scourges. They are way more common and killing way more people. And the way we're taught to think about them is like, for diabetes, for example, or metabolic syndrome on the left, we think of it as, it starts with some kind of sugar intolerance, so glucose intolerance. Your body's not able to metabolize or use glucose well. Or maybe you have, for atherosclerosis heart attacks, you get this rise in this LDL cholesterol, so that's why the GPs are prescribing statins left, right, and center. Cancer, we worry about these genetic mutations, and for Alzheimer's, you have these weird proteins showing up in neurons called amyloid and tau, and we think those are the start of the Alzheimer's. And basically, those progress for years or decades, and then we get these late-stage diseases, and we call them type 2 diabetes and so on. And this is the way we're trained to think as doctors, and so it's natural to try and target the middle level, right, and suppress or eliminate, germ theory style. So these aren't infections, but now germ theory has spilled over to dogmatically affect all our thinking. We're trying to cheat all these things with germ theory by suppressing and eliminating. It's not bacteria this time, it's other targets. We've just decided that these are the targets. This is how it works in medicine, I'm sorry to say. This really is how it works. So basically, health is considered the absence of disease in this paradigm. As soon as my patients sort of, I've got them to a certain level where the symptoms are better, they're out of hospital, and we don't think about the actual real, what it really means to be healthy. It's, okay, you're free enough from the symptoms time to go, and that's what we do. So we're basically trying to suppress and eliminate the middle layer, and it's not working. It's not working. We know it's not because the lifestyle disorders are so common. Here's an alternative. So if we look at the lifestyle disorders as basically different manifestations of a single disease, and the disease is mitochondrial dysfunction, poor mitochondrial health, poor terrain, then you could see that these are not diseases. These are responses to that. So it's the body's response to become glucose intolerant. Maybe the body becomes glucose intolerant because there's too much glucose, so the cells start becoming insulin resistant and raising the bar so glucose doesn't enter them, because the glucose, constant waves of glucose, of sugar, are damaging. So it's a response, not a disease itself. That's a key mind flip. Same with these other ones. They're all, I can't go into the details, I don't have the time today, but there's really good reasons to think they're all responses to this underlying problem. And the response is what carries on over years or decades. I don't see these as diseases anymore. I see these as metabolic disorders, metabolic responses to one disease, which is mitochondrial dysfunction, which still is an elephant in the room. We're not focusing on it. If we focused on the top layer, we'd have a lot more success. Under this paradigm, health is optimized mitochondrial function, optimized metabolism. These are the key players in metabolism, bar none, mitochondria. You optimize them, and then it should trickle down here and improve the rest of them. So it's basically turning it on its head and saying there's one disease, not a whole bunch. For most lifestyle disorders, not every disorder, but the lifestyle ones are the ones that are going crazy in today's day and age. And like I said, 50 years ago, they were all pretty uncommon. Cancer was around, but not as common as it is today. And basically, it's focused on restoration, not destruction and elimination. This is what a true doctor should be doing, in my humble opinion. Now, we can use both. I use medications too, I'm not against them. But this should be the A game. And I think this appeals to me as a clinician, as a doctor, far more. And I should be a doctor of health, not a doctor of medicine. Okay, so this leads to metabolic strategies. Now, what are those? Those are basically methods that orchestrate the body to go into a state that helps heal the mitochondria. Your mitochondria, your body has an amazing capacity to heal. It really does. And if we just get out of the way and let it do its job, it can do amazing things. So this will mitigate the impetus for the lifestyle disorders. And strategies, there are a number of them, but I go with fasting as the A game, the number one best bar none. So again, it's not up there. And keto diets, I think, are pretty good too, but not as good, or low carb diets. Keto is a very, very low carb diet. So basically the main difference between them, they both, there's lots of evidence saying that they aim to restore the mitochondrial function. They do other things too, weight loss and so on, but those are side effects. And that's why a lot of people go wrong with the keto diet and fasting. They're trying to get weight loss, but that's a nice side effect, but it's a side effect. That's not the real reason. The real reason is to improve your mitochondrial health, so you optimize your brain function, you improve your focus, improve your cognition, you restore your anabolic catabolic balance, and so on. There's a whole bunch of things. If you just focus on this one target. So fasting, basically, you're running your body on fat, not sugar. Almost everyone runs the body on sugar. So you flip it over and you're running on fat. With fasting, the fat comes from your body. With the keto diet, it comes from the diet, because the diet of a keto diet is a very high fat diet. There's other ones. Calorie restriction, someone mentioned, is possible. I don't favor that. I think it's a little bit more difficult. It does require some willpower. These top two really don't. It's if you make the psychological mind flip. And specific exercise regimens can be good. There's other ones. Sleep has benefits for mitochondria and so on. Similar mechanisms. Okay, so fasting is basically voluntary abstinence from food and drink for specified periods of time, minimum 12 hours. That's the commonly accepted period of time. And it's been taken up to like 382 days or something. That's the world record, so it's a bit ridiculous. That guy was a big man at the start. There's different ways you can do it. So TRF is time-restricted feeding. So commonly, this is the one I started on myself a number of years ago, 16 and 8. You fast 16 hours a day, you eat 8 hours. And you just pack your meals into an 8-hour window. Giving yourself that 16 hours of fasting where you just have water, maybe a bit of tea or black coffee, that's restoring your balance of anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism is building up the body, catabolism is breaking stuff down. And when you break stuff down, it's nice. You get rid of junky crap. You let young things renew. Mitochondria can renew. Old mitochondria get killed. So that balance between anabolism and catabolism is huge, and we've lost the balance. We're always anabolic now. We're eating 3 meals a day plus a couple more snacks throughout the day, always telling the body to grow, grow, grow. Insulin's always up, 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 and adults are going to grow that way. That's good for kids and maybe in pregnancy, but adults don't go up anymore. We go that way, so that's not good. You want a balance as an adult. This restores the balance. So time-restricted feeding, you can take it longer, 18 and 6, 23 and 1, that's 1 meal a day, called OMAD. I love that one. That's one I use a lot now. And you can do alternate daily fasting, so every second day you do fasting. 5 to 2, which is 2 days a week. There's a doctor called Michael Mosley who popularized that. Prolonged fast, anything over 2 days. We're using that for the hard disorders, like this cancer trial. I'll tell you about it at the end. Keto diets are this high-fat, adequate protein, low-carb diets. These are natural diets. This is our natural state, is to actually be in ketosis. Fasting and keto diets put us in ketosis. If you look at our hunter-gatherer evolutionary history, where we spent 99.5 or 0.6% of our time in, we were in ketosis almost all the time, not glucose up, which is what we are in almost all the time now. It's really weird, the way we live now. It's totally bizarre. So these just limit carbohydrates to below 50 grams daily, and you can do them different ways. This is a method, not a diet. It's a method. So it can be vegetarian, it can be vegan, it can be carnivore, it can be omnivore, it can be Mediterranean, it can be Indian, it can be Mexican. It doesn't matter what. Because if you don't think of it as a diet, and this is where a lot of people get into these diet wars, which is not constructive at all, because you get carnivores and vegetarians going at each other. It's a method, and you can be keto carnivore, keto vegan, it doesn't matter. As long as you're in that state where your mitochondria are healing, that's all I care about. So I've got patients who do all these things. I mix it up myself. I've gone vegetarian, I've gone carnivore, omnivore. I love Mediterranean omnivore personally, tilting towards carnivore at times. It doesn't matter, and you don't have to have fiber either. Okay, if you go on a pure carnivore diet, there's no fiber in that diet, you do very well. People who do a carnivore diet properly actually do very well, particularly if it's keto. And fiber is a very important thing. However, ketones, which these keto diets and fasting amplify, take over a lot of the functions of the fiber. Okay, so there's a lot of mythos, and a lot of doctors don't understand this. And not saying just take my word for it, because I'm just one guy, but I mean, I've put years into this, and you know, I think the more I see and the more actual results I see in patients, and of course I've experimented on myself to the nth degree, makes me feel more confident about these statements. Okay, so again, so what do these fasting keto diets, these metabolic strategies do? They do a ton of stuff, and I don't want you to look at the details. Just look at the end result. They diminish mitochondrial oxidative stress. They encourage hormesis, which is making the mitochondria more efficient over time. They enhance mitochondrial renewal, which is mitogenesis, and they get rid of junky ones, old ones, which is mitophagy. That's huge. There's no medication or even combination of 10 medications that can hope to do even 10% of that. It's huge. This is the A game. Medications are the B game. Doctors should be prescribing fasting protocols and proper dietary advice and stuff. And so it's an orchestra. There's no one instrument that's too important here. We have a lot of drugs that focus on just insulin or IGF-1 or mTOR, AMPK. Those are all master regulators of metabolism, but this changes everything. It's not about one instrument. It's not a faster diet, it's a method. If you think of these as methods, as strategies, then you avoid this whole diet war thing and all the rest of this stuff. They're potentially very powerful, and the overall aim, which I love, this is the part I love the most, it is aimed at healing your body, not trying to destroy stuff, and this is how we treat things with heart disease. We try to knock down LDL cholesterol. With cancer, we try to radiate and chemotherapy and destroy the tumor and change the genetic mutations and get rid of them. And then Alzheimer's, we try to make vaccines that targets these proteins and destroys the proteins in the neurons, and none of it's working. Okay, not for the bad cancers, not for Alzheimer's, and certainly the evidence in heart attack and stroke has been grossly inflated and exaggerated. It's the efficacy of statins and so on. Okay, I'm not against any of these things, but they've just been totally exaggerated. And there's a reason for that. There's money to be made, right? And I know the crowd I'm talking to here. I'm not against making money, but I have a problem with it when it interferes with truth. Okay, so basically fasting keto, if you look at that metabolic syndrome, which is the scourge of humanity, and 50% of people in New Zealand have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. I mean, that's just really high. These basically reverse that syndrome. Type 2 diabetes, we're taught in medical school, I was taught, and we're still taught, as medical students are still taught, that it's a lifelong chronic disease and it's always going to be there. It's not true. And I would like that person who coughs, BS, thank you, because it's absolutely not true. Type 2 diabetes in almost all cases, I would actually say almost all, type 2, not type 1, but type 2 is way more common, totally reversible. Totally reversible. And as are all these other things. Fatty liver disease, that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is very common now, reversible. Inflammation that's associated with them, reversible. High blood pressure, reversible. You don't need the meds to do it in most cases. And then you can get a nice cholesterol profile with these. So paradoxically, these things improve your cholesterol profile. It's not about the LDL. The LDL goes up a little bit with the keto diets, but the LDL is not the part of the metabolic syndrome, and there's a reason we're focused on LDL. Money has something to do with it. So again, if you want to read about this, go to that paper. But I'm just trying to say that, this extremely common, devastating thing, and this is devastating, this metabolic syndrome. When diabetes gets rampant, it's devastating. You get limbs chopped off, you get blindness, you get chronic kidney failure, and so on. This is reversible. This doesn't have to happen. It's really worth doing now. Okay, I'm going to end this talk by talking about cancer. Cancer is this disorder. I don't think of it as a disease anymore. I think of cancer as a disorder, a metabolic response to mitochondria damage. And basically you get these hallmark properties in cells, and you get this abnormal growth and spread in a certain part of the body, depending where the cancer afflicts you. And it's been 100 years. We've had this theory called somatic mutation theory. It basically says mutations in cells cause cancer. And the way it goes is, you've got this nice little cell, say in your brain, whatever. You get these mutations that start to occur in the nucleus. The nucleus is this sort of thought to be the control center of the cell, where all the genes are, and the genes make proteins that do stuff in the cell, and so you get these mutations. And then you get more mutations over years and years, and then you get enough of them, and the cell just says, to hell with it, I'm just gonna, we get these activated oncogenes, which are genes that tell the cell to grow, and we have tumor suppressor genes, which would normally stop growth. They get inactivated, so you get excess growth. But it's all thought to be starting because of these mutations on the left. And there's just a lot of inconsistencies with this theory. I was just in Spain, Portugal last week, and I was presenting this to a big cancer conference, basic cancer scientists. From here on, this is part of what I presented to them. And they surprisingly had a very good reception to this, because almost all the other talks are going on this theory, whereas I have a different perspective. And I was unsure how it would be received, to be honest, but it was pretty good. So the first inconsistency is basically all types of cancer show massive mitochondria abnormalities, and that's just kind of ignored by cancer science today. At that conference, there was one other talk. There was like 100 talks, 3-day conference. One person talked about mitochondria in sort of an offhand manner. It was like, except for me, of course, insane. So the majority of human tumors show reduced mitochondrial numbers. They have, don't worry about the words, they're structurally abnormal. So on the left is a normal one there. That's a really high-powered microscope. Those lines are the membranes where the energy production is done. That's the key part of the mitochondria, which is that bean-shaped thing where the energy is done. If you look at a mitochondria in a GBM, this is the glioblastoma multiforme that Ryan mentioned, that basically the most terrible brain cancer you can get, one of the worst cancers of all time. There's no membranes, no cristae. So how can that cell make energy? It's really quite bad. And this is sort of not really given enough emphasis, in my opinion. This is the most powerful reason, though. This is very powerful. This demonstrates cause and effect. So scientists around the world in multiple labs have transferred mitochondria or nuclei from one cell to another with cancer cells and normal cells. And you create these things called cybrids, which is you've got a nucleus from a cancer cell and the mitochondria from a normal cell, or the reverse. Now it's very interesting what happens here. So red is the cancerous, green is the normal. If you take a normal cell mitochondria, the normal little green bean-shaped guys in there, and you combine it with a cancer nucleus, the genetic theory of cancer, the one that pretty much all oncologists go on today, says that cell should become cancerous because the genes in the nucleus cause cancer. Except in pretty much 100% of the cases, it stays normal. So that makes no sense, right? If you got you got genes causing cancer and all the genes are in the nucleus, that cell should become cancerous. And if you take a cancerous mitochondria in a cell and a normal nucleus, you put a normal nucleus in there, you get rid of the cancerous nucleus, okay? Then basically the genetic theory of cancer says that cell should become normal because all the genes are good. The green blob has good genes and the genes cause cancer. There's no genes causing cancer, so it should become normal. It stays cancerous, and in fact the nucleus gets mutations. So what does that say? It says the problem is the mitochondria. The mitochondria determine the fate of a cell. So we should not be focusing on killing mutations in the nucleus. We should be focused on renewing the health of the mitochondria. And this has just been swept under the rug. This is like 30 years of experience, multiple labs. Some of the labs were trying to prove the opposite thing, that genetic theory works, and they all came up with these results. It's pretty remarkable. The third thing, I'm just going to gloss over this Warburg effect. You might have heard of the Warburg effect. The Warburg effect just says, on the left is a normal cell. Normal cells can use sugar and fats for fuel, like hybrid engines. Cancer cells on the right basically crank up their sugar intake by a factor of 10 to 100 times. It's massive, and they can't use fats very well at all, if at all. And fats includes ketones, because ketones come from fats. It's a molecule that comes from fats. So basically, cancer cells love sugar. All right, now when you fast or do a keto diet, what are you depriving? Number one, you're knocking out your sugar intake. It's basically very low. And with fasting, of course, it's gone. So you can see that's an obvious potential benefit. So let's look at a different theory. Basically, this mitochondria theory that I presented at this conference says normal mitochondria over years are exposed to a whole bunch of things, radiation, chemo, the main one being the diet, and the lack of too many meals throughout the day, too many carbohydrates, constant excess, which damages mitochondria through a variety of mechanisms based on excess sugar. The damage accumulates over a long time, you get the dysfunction, and then the cell faces a choice. It's like, okay, so either I can die, or I can go back to a plan B, which is the Warburg effect. The Warburg effect allows you to crank up your sugar intake by 10 to 100 times and make energy, albeit very inefficiently, but still make enough energy to survive. And that's why the cells become cancerous. And then mutations occur because the cell can't repair normal mutations that happen all the time, because although it's surviving, the Warburg effect is not as good as having healthy mitochondria. So it's got enough energy to survive, but not enough to maintain optimal repair. And so you get the mutations as a response to the cancer, not the cause. We're trying to treat it down here. We should be treating it over here. And then you get the cancer state. So if this is true, we need to restore those guys. Okay, so I'm not sure how much. Have I got 5 minutes left? Okay, all right. So I'm just going to talk now a little bit about our Waikato research, which of course I'm biased towards, but I mean, it's quite interesting, I think, what we've been doing. This is just for cancer. I'm not going to talk about our Alzheimer's, Parkinson's stuff, or any of the other stuff we do. 5 years ago, this young lady came in. I was seeing her for myasthenia gravis, which is a weird neurological disorder, but she had just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Basically she was offered 1 year of palliative chemotherapy by our oncologist. And he was very honest, he was a good guy. He said, you're probably not going to make it. By the end of the year, you're probably dead, even with the chemo. And radiation's not an option. It is too big to be surgically resectable. It was massive. So he said, that's it. And so she saw me and we decided, well, maybe we should just try not doing that. What's the point of doing a year of chemotherapy and getting the hair loss and all that stuff? She just had a daughter, by the way. So she wanted to have more than that. And so we decided to go with aggressive fasting keto diet strategy. She did a 7-day fast every 1 to 2 months. And then she did a keto diet between the fasts. And we did this for 2 years. So here's the tumor. That's a chest CT scan. Now, on the right, that's like, the one on the left, sorry, is like where the patient is facing you. The red circle outlines the tumor. It's the size of a small football in her left lung. So you can see it would be like right there. It's pretty massive. And what you can't really see is at the bottom of the lung, it's seeding along the membrane. It's metastatic. It's seeding all throughout the lung and a little bit into the heart. The left one there is, imagine she's lying flat with her legs out towards you, so you can see how big it is from that angle. So this is not a trivial tumor. This is huge. And basically it was a bumpy road. I'm not going to go into details, but this is it, 95% gone 2 years later. I'm going to see her today, and her husband, she's over 5 years now, full quality of life. She never had chemo or radiation or surgery, okay? That's the end result, and we're still going. There's still a tiny bit of tumor there. We're dealing with it. She's still doing her fasting, still doing her keto diet. So, you know, it's one person, but highly encouraging. She was supposed to be dead with the standard of care. She's alive and well 5 years later. So this prompted me to, and that's in this report here that was published in a journal a couple of years ago. So this prompted me to think, well, maybe we can have some success with some other terrible cancers. And this glioblastoma multiforme it's like the worst brain cancer you can get. And it's terrible. People in their 40s, 50s, 60s get this, sort of the height of their wisdom and experience in life. And a lot of them are looking to, they have families to provide for, and they get this ridiculous diagnosis that says you're dead in a year. It's 50% of people are dead in 12 months. So, but still, and almost all are dead by 2 years. It's terrible, and it's not a nice way in one either. You get seizures and other crazy stuff. So basically, it took a long time to convince the oncologists at Waikato, but there are amazing oncologists there that are very open-minded, and to convince them I wasn't crazy. And they started giving me their patients. They gave me their worst of the worst initially. So the ones that had tried everything, the cancer's coming back, and they're already at some of them are truly at palliative at death's door, and they say, oh, you can try your fasting keto thing, and these guys, thanks. Okay, so we did that with 10 of them, and this is an example of one. That's the brain, the eyes at the top, and the white thing that circle's outlining is, it's not quite as big as the last patient's, but it's the trouble with the brain. There's no room to grow. If that grows too much, the brain just gets squished against the skull, and you're done. So that's terrible. You can't surgically resect that. So they were giving me the really tough ones. And we just decided to do this 10 patients, and I was only giving advice and stuff and helping them from afar to just see if they could do this. These advanced cancer patients could do this. And what we're aiming for was to get the glucose to ketone index below 6, which means get the glucose a little bit low and the ketones a little bit high, and see if they could even do it. So we did a 5 to 7 day fast every 1 to 2 months with the keto diet, intervening weeks. That's coming out probably in the next month or so. But it was successful. They were able to do it. We weren't looking at survival per se. They did okay, that being said, but it showed that they could do it. And that led us into our current trial. Okay, so they did it for 5 to 6 months. Mild adverse effects. And they had a GKI which was below 6, 3.2, which is pretty good for these really advanced cancer patients. And you can see that basically, I split it up to the fast and keto diet. The fast really got the glucose down and the ketones up on the far left really well. The keto diet, pretty good, and when you combine them, it's sort of halfway between. So basically what that is saying to you is that without the fast, I don't think you'd have anywhere near the same degree of success in achieving that target. Okay, so we're doing a clinical trial now on newly diagnosed GBM. The oncologists were happy enough with that study to get, okay, so now we're going to give you people who we just diagnosed, not people who are like a year post-diagnosis and really sick. And that's what we're doing now. We're looking at survival and quality of life now, because what matters to a cancer patient? Survival and quality of life, nothing else really. And we're basically doing a 5 to 7 day fast. It's timed in a very strict manner with their chemotherapy. And they're doing a 1 to 2 meal a day keto diet. It's a big lifestyle change. It's a huge change. But if you change the psychology of a person, make them realize that this is not the problem. The way everyone else lives is unhealthy. And we know it is because, again, 50% of the country has the prediabetes, diabetes, and Alzheimer's is doubling every 10 years and so on. So the yellow arrows show the fast. You do 2 5-day fasts in the first 6 weeks of chemoradiation, and then they get this adjuvant chemotherapy for 6 months, and we do another 5-day fast once a month. So it's very aggressive. That's still, we've only got 9 patients enrolled, so I don't really have results. But so far, quality of life and exercise tolerance seem to be going up a little bit, which is interesting. Survival, I can't say yet. And side effects are mild. So, take-home messages from this talk. I know I've thrown a lot at you. But I want you to understand that basically medicine works on a disease-centered paradigm. We're still using germ theory. In fact, germ theory has exploded and it's spilled over into all the non-infectious disorders. We try to treat things by attacking or suppressing or eliminating things. That's what the drugs are trying to do. They're trying to knock something down. And it views all these things as disease processes that you try to eliminate. But I'm saying maybe we have a better way in a health-centric paradigm that views these things as metabolic and hormonal responses to this mitochondrial dysfunction. The lifestyle disorders, not all disorders, the lifestyle ones, which is most of them now. The emphasis is on restoring and healing, not destroying. The metabolic strategies can improve or reverse metabolic syndrome. That's known. That paper I showed you that you can look up, there's plenty of trials showing that. I'm confident saying that you can reverse type 2 diabetes. I'm very confident saying that. I don't say that lightly. And early results in cancer, well, I guess they're promising. Cancer is very, very advanced, though, metabolic response. Can we actually reverse that? Like that one patient, maybe, but can we do that for a lot of patients? I don't know. Maybe we can slow it down at the least, though. That would be a nice thing. Maybe you can give people 2 or 3 years instead of 1. We'll see, with better quality of life. Anyways, I do think we have an opportunity to usher in a new era of health, and there's a lot of sick people in the Western countries today, and I think we really need to get on top of this. This is a serious priority, because if you're healthy, you can do all those other things, and help a lot of other people with your own day-to-day business. Thanks very much.
Of course. Yeah, we'll take a few questions.
Sorry, it took so long.
And then we'll try and wrap up in a few minutes, but I'm sure there'll be a few.
Yeah, Matthew, firstly, mindful of the room you're in and the mighty Waikato, are the carnivores going to beat the vegetarians one day or not? But a more serious question would be, just talk to us more about what you consider fasting. I'm just mindful that there's various different sort of fasting theories floating around. I'd be interested in actually hearing a medical professional's view of what.
Yeah, I'll answer the second one first, because that's probably the more important one. So fasting is basically, it's about duration and then intensity. So duration, like I said, minimum is 12 hours. Intermittent fasting is sort of 12 to 48 hour fasts. Once you get past 48 hours, you're into those prolonged fasts. In terms of intensity, you can do nothing, which is like Ramadan, but you can only do that for so long. Most fasting is best done with water-only fasting. If you do longer than 2 days, you need to add in salt. I personally prefer water, tea, coffee fasts, so I love coffee, so I will have 2 or 3, or sometimes 4 coffees when I'm doing I do a 4 or 5 day fast every couple months now. And I'll have some black coffee or a little bit of cream in it, and anything that doesn't have any appreciable amounts of sugar. You can do also fasts where you have a little more intake. You can do protein sparing fasts, where you have a tiny little meal of sardines or tuna or something. Some people do that if they're exercising like crazy and they don't want to lose muscle. And yeah, there's different ways to do it. And I think the beauty of fasting is no matter how busy you are, no matter how stressed you are, no matter how low your socioeconomic status and how poor you are, you can fast. It blows through all that stuff. There's no excuse to fast. Absolutely none. Even if you're sick and don't feel well, you can fast. And so it is a beautiful thing that you work into your lifestyle. What's the best duration? What works best for you? For me, that's 1 meal a day. I skip breakfast, I skip lunch, and I have a nice dinner. I just power through lunch. I get more efficiency done at work. And I like coffee, so I'll have coffee in my fast, but some people don't, and they can do water or tea. So yeah, that's that answer. Carnivore versus vegetarians. Look, it's just amazing how the debates are structured. I guess if you look at, I always go back to evolution, and I look at, because that's 99.5 or 0.6% of the time that we spent in. The last 5,000 to 10,000 years of agriculture is a blip on the amount of time that we've been on this earth as humans, and it's not really normal. So pretty much it depends on your ancestry, I think. Really, people who evolved, Northern Europeans, Mongols, native Scandinavians, the native Inuit of Canada, where I'm from, they had pretty much a carnivore diet, carnivore keto. They would have had a big meat hit, and then gone without food for a while. So lots of fasting, lots of keto, lots of meat and fat. But people, as you get closer to the equator, so particularly like sort of Southeast Asia and places like that, more vegetables creep into the native diet. So I think it's important to keep in mind. They would still have been in ketosis most of the time because of the fasting, and the vegetables they ate were really high in fiber and not low in sugar, like like the fruits we have today, for example, are not normal. They're not normal at all. The original watermelon was that big. And so they should have more vegetables, I think. There's very few societies, I can't find one that evolved strictly as vegetarians, unless it was recently in the last few thousand years and out of ethical reasons. But so I think some meat, even if you're a pescatarian, is good. But yeah, as your ancestors get close to the equator, you probably want to throw in more vegetables. Yeah?
Hopefully I can ask this question okay. The LDL cholesterol that you talked about earlier, a lot of people worry about having too much fat to increase that. Can you just explain why that's not the case?
Yeah, so fasting will reduce your LDL. Keto diet will increase it slightly in most people, not all, but most. And that is a concern under the current paradigm because we target LDL so much, even though it's not part of the metabolic syndrome. It's triglycerides and HDL that are part of the metabolic syndrome, more important. When you do a keto diet, your LDL raises, but there's two components to LDL. There's large buoyant particles and small dense particles. The small dense ones, if it is sort of contributes to the atherosclerosis, it's those guys that contribute to it, not the large buoyant ones. The keto diet amplifies your large buoyant ones and not the small dense ones. They in fact go down, and so does fasting. It amplifies the large buoyant, but the whole LDL still goes down. So that's why I'm perfectly comfortable with an LDL profile that goes higher, including my own, doing that, because we do know that if your cholesterol, LDL and stuff goes too low, most of your cells are made of, that's a huge constituent of cholesterol. Your brain is like a ton of cholesterol in there. You need it. Otherwise, you start to feel down, depressed, mood disorders, and so on. So I think I see LDL as an intermediate in the process. It might spur it on a little bit, but it's mainly an effect of the cause, which is the mitochondrial problem in the blood vessels. And that's just not how people see it. They see it as the cause, so you got to smash it down. But we know the statin trials, the statistics are very manipulative in the way that drug companies, they say, oh, statins reduce your risk of heart attacks by 36%, but the way they're looking at that is they get a relative risk reduction. It really is about 0.1%, and you could debate that it's not due to the LDL lowering properties anyways. At the end of the day, it's such a smidgen of a difference, if any, in terms of your risk of heart attack and stroke, and I really, unfortunately, this is pushed very hard for various reasons, and drug companies are a big one. It's a huge business.
Cool, time for one more question. Time check, guys.
How do you know, how do you monitor that you're getting the right mitochondria response?
Very good question, and I don't know, because this is a whole field that needs to evolve, because we really need to assess what optimized mitochondrial function means. I'm pretty sure it means that you have a good ratio of new and old, and no, old junky ones aren't predominating, and you're able to cycle through the new and old ones. I'm pretty sure it means that they don't produce a lot of free radicals, and they're able to give lots of energy. But I think they exist in populations. The few hundred or a couple thousand in each cell are actually, they interact and they fuse and they divide and they're doing all kinds of things with each other that we don't understand because we haven't actually put the time and effort into it, because it's not the focus. And I think we really need to evolve the field and find out what are we actually trying to achieve. The way I'm measuring it is I'm looking at the responses. Does it make diabetes better? Does it make the Alzheimer's better? Does it make the cancer better? And I'm thinking, well, if that tumors go down and Alzheimer's improved, things like that, that's a good thing. But what's happening actually at the mitochondria level, I'm not looking at that. And I need basic scientists. You'd have to have basic scientists doing that. And we just haven't got the good criteria for it. It's an excellent question, and I think about it a lot.
Thanks, Matt. I think Jenny's going to say a few words.
Oh, well, thank you. Hi everyone, Morena. Just a quick wrap up, I'm conscious of time. A big thank you to all of you for attending today's Inspire session, and a big thank you to Matt for sharing your knowledge and also your research. It's been a really interesting topic and one that I'll be sort of pondering about my chocolate bar this morning, if I consume that. Also to Ryan, without you Ryan we wouldn't have Inspire, so a huge appreciation for that. As Matt said, what we'll do is we'll send out Matt's slides as a follow-up and also a recording of the event. The next Inspire session is due to take place on the 2nd of November. You'll be sent a link to register, and that features Sarah Ulmer, the cycling legend that we know. So we look forward to seeing you then, and please go ahead and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.